Welcome to the Grief Ladies, the practical guide to what comes next. I'm Kelly Doherty.
And I'm Karen Arnold, and we are two grief professionals with over 50 years of combined experience. We're here to validate, educate, and give you tangible tools you can actually use.
Each episode motivates you to take action and reminds you it's okay to want to feel better. This is the Grief Ladies, a guide to what comes next.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Grief Ladies podcast. I'm Karen here with Kelly, and we're going to jump right in as we always do with our guest. We have with us today, Brittany DeMarco-Furman. And Brittany, I'll just start right off by reading your bio and giving everybody a little bit an idea who you are, what you do. So Brittany is a licensed funeral director, fourth generation licensed funeral director at Glenville Funeral Home in Glenville, New York, where she brings compassion, integrity, and meaningful storytelling to families during life's most vulnerable moments. Raised in the funeral home, Brittany learned the importance of dignity and service at a young age, becoming part of her family's more than 100-year legacy of care. So, Brittany, we're really glad to have you here with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So today we always kind of pick a letter and we were thinking of your experience and working with families. And so today's episode is going to kind of focus, amongst other things, but a little bit around the letter I, which is for interacting, knowing that family challenges and communication and some of the planning and all of the stuff that goes along with that, before and after are all probably really big parts of what you're doing and managing. So we're really eager to hear all about that today.
I interact with a lot of people, so that's
That's perfect.
people think I'm just, behind the scenes and they think I'm in the morgue all day. It's like, no, I'm more with the living, It's more bigger than you would expect. So
Well, I also am going to just plug that the way all three of us actually met. So Brittany actually reached out to me because I'm in the capital region of New York. She reached out because she was looking for some resources for her families that she worked with. And so we connected. And then Brittany was part of the Grief Experience book with Karen and I. So just want to bring that up. And she shares about what it was like, to be able to work with these families and their legacy, and also creating a bit of a bucket list for our readers in her chapter. Is there anything you want to share, Brittany, about your chapter?
yeah, so my chapter, continuing for the dead, it's called The Last Responder because we are the last person to respond to a life and learn how we could celebrate each life. So with that, every person I've met, the families have given me their perspective of their loved one. So I've kind of taken their stories and the lessons and the inspiration from each of these individuals we've honored. And I've taken something from that, whether that's, maybe less screen time and spend more time with your family. I think we all can do that. And things like, oh, well, I used to not really have that big of a genre for music. So my love for all this kind of music has come out from like the 60s and 70s. And I always say that it's a learning experience every day, and I learn something new every day. So it's amazing as humans. We're all so different. So I kind of get to learn more about the human experience as a third party. So it's wonderful for me.
Yeah.
Great.
So tell us a little bit, because I think you're almost kind of in, on the one hand, there are funeral homes, throughout most of our area. So it's not something that it's totally unfamiliar, but most people haven't had the experience to really get to talk to someone who works in, that business, and it being a family business. So what does some of your day-to-day look like for you in terms of how you are attending, as you said, to those who have passed, and then to their family and the people that love them?
So every day is different. Some days is just clerical work, catching up on creating prayer cards and doing obituary writing. But then, of course, we get the call where we have to drop everything and go to a hospital, a home, and take a loved one into our care. And that is the most sensitive part of our job, is being there to take the person away from where they passed. The hardest is when it's in their family home, and respectfully taking them back into our funeral home, into our care. So those days are so difficult, but they're the most important in our profession because it's the first impression on the family, on how we're going to make them feel and make sure they feel comfortable. And, the what's next and all these questions of like, oh, where's the social security number? What are we going to do? What did mom want? We try to guide them in a calm manner to let them know that they can make decisions and the next time we meet. But here's some things to think about. All you need to know is that we're going to take it from here and you don't have to have all the answers now. So, those experiences are very meaningful in my profession. It creates a bond that we continue through the funeral experience. And then, of course, what we do in the behind the scenes in the morgue, caring for the dead. It's both an art and a science, and it's also a ministry. Some people are like, "Ooh, I could never do that," but there's something beautiful about making somebody look like their natural appearance, especially after a long illness, say cancer, and their faces don't look the same. They become frail, where we could make them look like themselves again with restorative art and makeup, and of course in the funeral home, lighting, and when we casket a body, it's kind of it's an art and a way that we can make them look peaceful so they can have that final goodbye. And then, of course, the funeral, where it's a lot of interacting, family and friends and people you haven't seen in years come together, and it's stories and ripple effects coming together under one roof. And I know people feel a little overwhelmed about the funeral experience, having calling hours and a mass or a funeral, but it's healing because it showcases that this life mattered, and the people that are in that room have a story to tell about the person who passes away. So it really comes full circle to celebrate life and have that opportunity to begin a healthy grieving experience.
Yeah. Well, and so I think you, and so Brittany also does a lot of speaking engagements out in our community. She's, I feel like, always somewhere. She was at a women's expo a couple of weekends ago. And, but I want to talk a little bit about, before we get into the interacting, something that I found a lot of comfort from. And I'm very grateful to Brittany for, and I will always be grateful for this. Is the first time that I came, I met Brittany at her funeral home. My dad was aging, and I knew, at some point we were going to have to navigate his death, and I knew he wanted to be buried on Long Island with my mom, but he lived in Florida, so how to navigate that. And one of the things you recommended was pre-planning my dad's funeral.
Hmm.
And so you gave me some guidance on who to contact, and I contacted that funeral home on Long Island, and my dad and I spent a weekend together, and we pre-planned his funeral and what he wanted, and answered all of those. How many questions are there, Brittany? Like 100 and
Over 100, yes.
yeah.
It's
So
from
we
everything
answered,
from flowers to social security number to the things we need for the death certificate that people don't have right on their mind, especially if they're not pre-planning and they don't have the source there for all that information.
yeah. And so we went through all those, and I'm so grateful because I didn't know half of those answers. So
Mhm.
my dad did, and we were able to have this conversation. He wasn't ready to prepay yet. He didn't like the price tag,
That's okay. The
um,
most important part, though.
yeah, and I wish he had, but, I think I remember you saying something like prepaying because it's like an average of 7% every year it goes up. So
Yeah, and
sometimes it saves you money actually. Um, but what happened for me is, as soon as my dad died, I was able to give the funeral home to the I sold hospice, which funeral home, they took care of it. And then I got a phone call in the car on my way to, I was going to his assisted living to kind of get some of his belongings. And the funeral home called me and she said, "Well, since you already pre planned everything, Kelly, I only have one question for you. And do you want your dad clean shaven?"
yep. Mhm.
And so to know, like, in this time of, like, I'm in Florida, my sisters aren't there, I'm by myself, I'm trying to navigate all this, figure this out, to know that I didn't have to worry about any of that was like, I can get kind of emotional talking about it because I just will always be grateful for you, Brittany, for you being able to, like, lead me through that and encourage me to do that, and what a difference it made for me and my family in a very difficult time. And just so I will always plug pre-planning with you because it can make such a difference.
It really does, and yes, I didn't even mention that. That's a huge thing I do is, people will call us actively asking questions, but I'm also out there in the community promoting it in a way that doesn't make it so scary. And it's a conversation that needs to be had because so many families come to us with no arrangements, no cemetery plot, and they don't know where to begin. So, if we could do this in advance and ask those questions in a sincere and thoughtful manner, it really goes a long way when you need us. And I'm out there in the community, the Women's Expo, I'm there with my booklets. I'm actually playing a game trying to get people to have an icebreaker to want to talk to me besides having some Villa Italia cookies there, be like, hey, if you just want to pass by and have a cookie, that's fine too. But I have a game where people come to our table and I give them clipboards. And whether it's a mom and daughter there or two sisters, I ask questions that they have to answer about each other. So the first question is, what is mom's maiden name? You would not believe how many people don't know. So say it's their mother's maiden name. So what's grandma's maiden name? So many people don't know that. And then what is their favorite flower? What is their favorite song? What year did they graduate high school? And then I have the morbid question, casket or cremation. So you wouldn't believe the laughs, but also like, oh my gosh, I don't know these questions, or oh, I'm glad I know now after coming to our booth and exploring that just with 5 questions. So, I'm out there trying to promote it in a way, and I have a lot of literature out there. The book is great for advertising it, but I just want people to know that even if you're not ready to meet with a funeral director, start having those conversations. Put the politics to the side at Thanksgiving dinner and go around and ask some questions and learn about what your parents want, because it is so hard to go through that after losing somebody and having to answer these questions and be in the darkest of grief because you're confused and you want to make sure that you're able to honor your loved one in a meaningful way.
Before we jump back into the episode, we want to share something that's really close to both of us. The Grief Experience, Tools for Acceptance, Resilience, and Connection, is not only a powerful book, it's actually how we met.
We were 2 of the 25 authors who came together to write this collection. Each chapter offers a personal story about grief, different relationships, different circumstances, different ways people try to make sense of life after someone they love died. Readers tell us these stories feel honest, compelling, and surprisingly reassuring. Many say it helped them feel less alone in what they're carrying.
What makes this book unique is that it doesn't stop at the story. Each chapter ends with a practical tool, something the reader can use right away. One reviewer said the suggestions at the end of the chapter became a lifeline when they weren't sure what to do next. If you're looking for grounded support, or you're a therapist wanting to understand better the reality of grief from many angles, this book offers connection, clarity, and real guidance, not cliches.
You can find The Grief Experience on Amazon, and we'd love to get your feedback. Well, it reminds me, I mean, Kelly and I have both worked for hospice. And so I spent some time out in the community at a table, for our hospital's hospice and trying to help people understand what it's about and when's the right time and the conversations. And I think sometimes there's an avoidance of it because the reality is just so scary and hard, for people to think about because, under most circumstances, this type of planning would be something we would see as favorable to be kind of ready. But it's just such a big and heavy topic for some people that it's just too hard for them emotionally. How do you help people through, that barrier, to try to get past what is a very difficult conversation to see how much it could help them down
Yeah,
the road?
absolutely. Well, like I said, uh, it helps when somebody just passes away and you have everything planned, of course,
Mm.
that's a benefit all in its own. I say it's the last gift you can give your family to help um, push away the confusion of what do they want. Also, the benefits of financial. If you want to prepay in New York, you would do a funeral trust, either irrevocable or revocable. Irrevocable means that all the money that was saved and gained interest over time is used for the funeral. Revocable means if, down the road, um, the plan was to have a full Italian burial for $14,000, and then last minute, the family was like, you know what? we actually want to do cremation and a memorial service for $5,000. Revocable will give back that money to the family. So they're in control of this money and they can take it out at any time before passing. So when we do the trust, we guarantee our merchandise, our services. So if it goes up, 100% over the course of 10 years, we're locked in. If that cherry casket that was $3,000 10 years ago is now $7,000. Well, sorry, Glenville Funeral Home, you lose the money because the family's locked in. So financially, it's a smart investment in a way because we all know we're going to die and we're going to need this. And the interest bearing accounts are so smart. And no one ever says, I wish I didn't spend the money for this. Or the family comes to us and they know that this is a gift that they either couldn't pay out of pocket or they know, well, wow, this is such a mom thing to do. She's protecting me till the end. So it's always a beautiful thing that we can share with families that are on the border of whether they want to do a pre-need. And you don't even need to pre-fund. You could just come and sit down with me and answer a few questions and we could just talk about life. I think when people come in, they're so nervous. I make them feel like a friend. I want to know about who you were before you were mom. Tell me about you as a kid and what your dreams were and how did you meet your husband? And we get like girly chat sides going and it's nice to go down memory lane. People do want to talk about their lives and it kind of becomes uh like a verbal obituary that I'm here writing notes and at the end of the meeting they're like that was fun and my hands hurting. I'm like, well, we could write a book, honey. Maybe we could work on that. So it becomes an enjoyable experience and when they leave they have peace of mind, questions are answered, and they feel like they're in trusted hands. And I think that's the best part about my profession. I don't leave with just clients, I leave with friends and I leave with stories.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So one of the things you talked about, Brittany, was being like a funeral director, being the role as being the nervous system for the room during a funeral. And so, how do you navigate and how do you get families to slow down and communicate when maybe they didn't pre-plan and maybe they all have a different opinion on what should happen to mom or dad, and maybe there's some estrangement and some complicated feelings even amongst the siblings or other family members. So how do you navigate that?
Patience, letting the room cool down if necessary. So say if there's two siblings that have not talked to each other, they haven't gotten along for years. Sorry, there's a phone here. And they're sitting across the room to each other and they are not agreeing on what they want for mom or dad. Well, I want to hear both sides of the stories. They could talk it out as long as they need. And then I would put in my 2 cents and be like, well, you have the family plot at so and so cemetery. Do you want to have mom or dad be placed where their parents are? There's an available space that would, save money from purchasing another cemetery. Talking about leaving a gravestone, and maybe somebody can be in charge of the design of the gravestone, and somebody could design what the prayer card looks like. So finding a ways to balance. So both children have a say and not the other ones left out. So everybody feels important. And also, when I discuss like the obituary, because my favorite thing to do is obituary writing. No perspective of a life is the same to another person. So I want to hear their experience with their loved one. And even if I feel like, because I've had this many times where we got what we had to do and the meeting is complete, but then I would want to touch base with the other sibling in private on a phone call or in person, and vice versa to see how we can bring in their love and their story into the funeral. But in regards to if things get heated, it's patience. It's waiting for it to cool down, let them lead, and then maybe the guide when it's time to speak because I'm an outsider looking in and I don't. I mean, now I'm 10 years in, but imagine me at 26 years old at the end of the table trying to talk about life and make these people like get along that they don't know me. So it's plugging myself in when necessary, but then also letting them know that they're in control and I'm here to listen and we've never had a family that has not come together and in agreement and had found peace after the funeral. So always finding their purpose in the funeral is what we need to do.
I imagine you have such a front row seat to very early grief,
Hmm.
and that point where people are maybe still a little bit in the fog or kind of that disbelief, really focused on the to-do tasks. But I imagine you've learned a lot about grief through this job and doing this work. What are some of the things that have stood out for you, or what are some of the things that you find most often?
So some people that want to hold it all in, and that's okay, but we're here to let it all out in the funeral. We want to create a circle of trust and a circle of love and memories in that moment. We don't want them to leave the funeral home and feel like, well, that was a waste of money and waste of time. I should have just took some ashes and went out into the mountains by myself, which you can do, but this is a time of togetherness. And like I say, the ripple effect of, how much this life meant to other people. And, you get to learn the new stories about your loved one that you never knew before. Yeah. So I wanted to say an example. So just recently I had a family and they were young. They're my age. I went to school with them and their mom died and really strong. They were like kind of like robotic, like this and this and that. I'm like, I'm a funeral director. I'm a director. You guys just you relax. I'm here to make sure everything goes accordingly to plan. I'm here to make sure your needs are met and that you're most comfortable. So they I'm a really big believer in music, and in a way, I want them to find that release, and I feel like they didn't have it, so we were just playing soft music in the background, and then when we were doing the closing of the casket ceremony, I wanted to make it special. They weren't expecting this, but I wanted them to feel their emotions. So we called up every line of the family, the siblings and their children, to the nieces and nephews to the casket, and um then the other cousins came up, and then it was time for the boys and their spouses to come up with their children, and they come up to the casket, and as we're doing this, I play music, music that was, I don't want to say it's generic, but have you ever heard the song Supermarkets, Flowers by Ed Sheeran?
Mhm.
So something that was very about mom, and you got to hear the word mom, and the music and the lyrics were so beautiful that they had that moment. And instead of them just passing by the casket, they really were there at the casket, and they grieved and they held her hand, and you could just feel the power in that moment and shedding the tears and them holding each other. It was beautiful, and I would never like want somebody to cry, but I just felt like in that moment we kind of needed that. And then we all held hands, and nobody was talking about her throughout the time, um, when it became a little bit more private, but then everybody started, like, laughing and sharing stories and holding hands and hugging, and they just felt like, you could feel, like, the strength in the room because
Mm.
I'm a big energy reader, and it just felt like pure love. Like, I actually was gonna start sweating, and of course, I was, like, about to start crying too because it was just so beautiful, and then I looked at them, and I asked them if they were ready to close the casket, and they looked at me, they're like, "We are," and you just felt that they had that moment as a family, and we closed the casket, and I'll never forget, and they came over to me, hugged me like, "Thank you. I did not know I needed that, and, I was trying not to cry, but thank you," and that's what it's all about, and, there's a lot of energy in the building, and it was a positive moment, a sad one, but a positive moment. So, in regards to grief, I'm right there, but I also don't want people to bury it. You know more than anybody what that can do to somebody down the road if they don't face it when it's necessary. And I just felt as a guide, as a funeral director, that that would have been a moment that they wouldn't regret. So
Mm. Yeah.
So, Brittany, I'm curious because I think there's been a bit of a shift away from traditional funerals, and I don't necessarily think that's in people's best interest, right? I think coming together as a community and grieving together is really powerful and healing, and needed. And so, there's still some families that, because of COVID and things like that, have never had a service or never done anything, or they have a cremation and they don't have any, a celebration of life or anything. what would you say to somebody who maybe didn't do something and is now maybe thinking like, "Oh, I wish I had had that moment."
I would say call me. I have had families call, especially a lot last year in 2024 that we actually came together for the memorial service because they could never have it. And the word I use is togetherness. You know, you look around the room and you see the importance of their loved one and the impact they made. They didn't get to have that opportunity. They didn't get to hear the stories. They felt lonely and that maybe that life didn't matter, even though the circumstances, it's like life just moved on. So I would say, it's never late to have a service and it doesn't even have to be at the funeral home. It doesn't have to be with a funeral director. Make those traditions to honor your loved one, whether that's their birthday and where was their favorite place to go out to eat, their favorite music, writing. I'm always a big person about releasing. So if that's not speaking to each other, like in the form of a eulogy or talking in front of others, writing your favorite memory of a loved one and sending it, either that's by lighting it on fire and releasing it or sharing it with other family members that they can create a journal and a log that they can save for the next generation. I'm a big legacy person. I feel like it's important for us to document a life so you can share with the next generation because those are your ancestors. That's where you come from. I hear all the time that I'm a lot like my grandfather and I look a lot like my great grandmother. And I don't have too many photos of my great grandmother, but the best thing is when people meet me and they knew my grandpa, Michael DeMarco, and they're like, "You're so much like him." And it's astonishing to see the family continue in this industry and you are making him proud. It's honestly the best feeling. So I think carrying that legacy and finding ways to remember your loved one. They're gone, but they don't have to be gone here and in your memory. Don't be shying away from talking about them. So you don't need a funeral director. You just need to find what be meaningful to you. And don't do something that wouldn't be meaningful to them because it's about healing.
If you're looking for a place where you don't have to explain why the days feel different after someone you love has died, we created something for you. The Grief Ladies community is our private, free Facebook group where you can connect with others who get it. It's a space for steady support, real conversations, weekly prompts based on our grief framework, and guided tools you can use at your own pace.
You'll also get early access to workshops, new resources, and behind-the-scene updates from our podcast. If you want a community that's honest, compassionate, and grounded in practical support, come join us. Just search the Grief Ladies community on Facebook. We'd love to have you. So at this point now, Brittany, we talk about celebrating their life. And obviously you've been using those terms throughout our whole interview. And really what it is to help people be able to shift from focusing on the death to focusing on the life and remembering the love, remembering the memories, remembering the connection. And so we always ask each guest to kind of share about how they celebrate their loved one's life that have died. But I'm also curious, I would love to hear how you celebrate your grandma's life, but I would also love to know what are some of the creative and unique ways that maybe some of the families that you've worked with have, whether maybe it's doing something with the ashes or, maybe I love like the idea of having the QR code on a gravestone. So like that has like a slideshow. So it's kind of a two-part question for you today, Brittany, is how you do it, but also what have you heard from others?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll say like what we can do at the funeral experience in that moment, that's different. A takeaway station. So, for example, we have families that they don't know what to do with all of these items that were collected for the duration of a life. Say that they were CDs or books, or they were an artist and they have all these paintings. I say bring them to the funeral home, and if you already have the things that you want, share them with everybody else. So a takeaway station of what somebody's personality was like or what their interests were. So then they can continue on and share and keep and remember. Some really cool things now with cremation. There's the jewelry, and about Timeless Treasures that makes one of a kind cremation jewelry that doesn't look like cremation jewelry. and people keep it close to their hearts or on their fingers. And I think that's a really special way to remember and feel closer to your loved one when it comes to cremation. Other things, when it comes to cremation, you don't need a funeral director to go and do these memorial services, or what I say, excursions. Like, we have the Adirondacks in the backyard, and people make trips where they scatter the ashes using the scattering tubes all the time. We're there to provide the merchandise for that because, as you know, with media and TV, you've seen many movies where people throw out the ashes and a gust of wind comes and hits you right back in the face. There's mom. So we give scattering tubes that people can shake, and they're light to carry, and they could take on trips and go wherever their loved ones wanted to travel to, or where they feel closest to them. I find that very healing, and I know a lot of my families always follow up with how their experience was afterwards with me, and they said it was great. They felt the closest they were to them, and in a way, it was like letting go, that they could start moving forward because they know that they're at peace, and they have that peace that they were able to honor them in the way that they want. Back to the QR codes. That's what we have for my grandma is the QR code on the back of her stone. So instead of just seeing her gravestone at St. Anthony Cemetery, on the back there's a big QR code that you could scan and look at the thread that my cousins, aunts, and uncles and myself created, like a video and photo log, putting in journals about what she was like. My sister added her recipe. So it's
Oh,
kind of cool. So instead of just seeing a name etched on the stone, with the current media and technology, you could go further. So when my daughter's old enough to scan that, she'll learn more about her Mimi in heaven, we say. So that's special. And ways that I honor my grandma. My sister and I have her recipe, and we are making her sauce. It's not Garofalo sausage anymore because they went out of business, but we're using the best meats we can find, and trying to continue Sunday dinners as much as we can with the family, our cousins that are close by, and even things like what she left behind for us. She had a clown collection, such a creepy collection, but we all of us kids have a figurine, and they all have a story. Of course, mine looks like this homeless guy. I'm like, why do I like the homeless looking one? And and whenever anybody is at my house and they're like, Brittany, why do you have this thing? I'm like, oh my gosh, it was my grandma's, and she collected these weird little figurines, and it puts a smile on my face that I have a part of her and this weird story behind her collecting the clowns that I could share with other people. Also, the furniture that she let us, well, obviously, when we cleaned out her apartment, everyone took something that they wanted, and I got her the little desk that's from the 30s, and it's where I go and I do my writing. And I actually wrote part of the book on that desk, and that's kind of my I don't know, her essence is there. And a funny thing about that desk, the second drawer never opened up until I was moving the furniture, and I hid it a certain way and unlocked the second drawer and found all her love letters that my grandpa wrote to her from the Air Force. And it was so beautiful that we now have those handwritten letters of their story and their love and missing each other. And oops, I'm pregnant with another kid. 7 children. So I don't know. I know that we collect so much throughout our life, and as a funeral director, I'm also there as a friend and resource to families I serve on how they can, do junk removal, consignment. But I like to say, how about you have like a not an estate sale, but have the whole family come to the house, pick out what they want, and then that has purpose, and make sure that they continue. And I love the antiques that stay in the family. I think it's the nicest thing that people can keep in their home. I have many from my mother-in-law who passed away, and then both sides of my grandparents, and they'll always stay with me. And my daughter has to take them.
well, that's
Well,
awesome.
thank
I say to people all the time that, funeral directors are just the most amazing resource, more than people could ever know. Like just the things that you are aware of that probably is pretty everyday to you, but, people don't think about it until they need it. And I love the idea of the takeaway table. And I was actually thinking, even if that wasn't something that was able to happen at the funeral, that it could happen afterwards as you're cleaning out. I was literally just having a call with a woman today. She's talking about having to clean out her husband's stuff. She's, a few years out, but she's going to probably be moving soon. And she was saying, I'm just not sure what to do with the stuff. And I said, well, I know that, practically you know what to do. So what do you really mean? She said, well, I wanted to go somewhere to somebody that would care about it or enjoy it or that it would mean something to them. So I think that takeaway table you could kind of do anytime. You could mark it as a anniversary or their birthday or just to even have people participate. So I think that's just such an awesome suggestion. And that kind of goes into one thing that we like to do with each of our podcasts as we're wrapping things up here today. What is something that you would like to express to grieving people in terms of something that they could do today, maybe as part of that legacy or connection or honoring their loved one in some way?
Well, it's like where they are in their grief. And I always say, gosh, when you think about a life, there's so many facets about a person. But like I said, their relationship to them. So I would say what they shared, keep honoring it. Whether that's, they shared the same favorite kind of food, have a meal and talk about them, journal about them. If they need a little bit more space in their grief, I always believe in grounding and kind of meditating and just kind of feeling their essence and just deep thought. I think people get really busy in their head on how they should grieve. Sometimes it's just as simple as just sitting there with your thoughts and just thinking about them and writing it down how you're feeling in that way. And like my chapter says, continuing for the dead, what would they want you to do next? What would their advice be for you next? So your inner thoughts sometimes can play tricks on you, but listen to them sometimes. Like listen to them in the way that could be a guiding force on what you should do next, because people just start moving and get busy, get silent 2 weeks after a funeral. Think about what they would want for you and continue it for them.
Yeah. It's such a good guiding light for people, and to be thinking about like, that idea of that inspiration, and using your loved one as a guide to sort of help keep that momentum and going forward. So, Brittany, this has been so great. A lot of helpful information, lots of helpful information. If people wanted to find you or get in touch with you, what would be the best way for them to do that?
So we're from the Glenville Funeral Home that's centrally located in the Capital Region, New York. GlenvilleFuneralHome.com is a wonderful resource where you can find our phone number, our email, and it has a lot of resources for grief and also resources for pre-planning and what a funeral is. There's no right or wrong way to go about it now. A modern funeral, a traditional funeral, we are an open book on information.
Yeah. Well, I think you've really kind of pulled back a curtain a little bit and let us in on something, again, a side that we don't always get to talk about or see. So, Brittany, thank you so much for being here today. Thank you to everybody.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you, Brittany, for what you do for our community. Thanks for joining us on the Grief Ladies.
Don't wait to feel better to get started. Getting started is what makes you feel better. Put this week's tool to work.
If today's episode helped, share it with someone who needs it and leave us a review. We'd love to hear from you.
And remember, we're here for you, your trusted grief ladies, navigating this path together.